When I first started, I still remember everyone saying in the morning before we got out of bed, "Now what are you going to do today?" I said, "I'm not sure, but something good is going to happen."
We were different. We always dressed in suits, ties, and we were soon known that we didn't kid anybody.
I didn't only want to be an auctioneer. I wanted to be the best.
Sanford and I both assumed our responsibilities, and there was never any doubt in our minds about each other. We each had our responsibilities, and it worked.
One of the auctions that I did, I heard a couple talking about this new auctioneer. And the one lady says, "Why, I had even a goodie box for Drustea. He even has a good box to stand on."
Thursday is auction day at the Alderfer Auction Center in Hatfield, Pennsylvania. A remarkable range of merchandise is gathered, marketed, displayed, and sold to buyers near and far each week. But this is a people business, and the Alderfer staff knows how to serve them. They know because they're part of a business family, born from a true family. Two brothers who grew up together, treating others the way they themselves would wish to be treated. Today, Sanford and Harold Alderfer have moved to the sidelines, but are still always there. A lifetime of service means a lifetime of friends, and the habits of a natural showman never die. Today is a time to stop the sale for a moment and look back on a lifetime of achievement.
It is 20 years here at Hatfield, and it's been 50 years that Sanford put a sign in front of our house at 388 Main Street proclaiming that he was an auctioneer and he was open in business. So give him my hand. And it also represents Harold, who joined that in '62, I believe, if I'm right.
The values and integrity Sanford and Harold brought to their life's work have guided their company through each step of its development.
As Sanford realized that Vernon and I were serious in developing an auction facilities, his advice as always is quite simple. We don't want an auction barn atmosphere, and we don't want anything that would jeopardize the Alderfer commitment to its clients and customers, which was and still is people serving people.
Where do those values come from, passed from the brothers to a new generation? Look back to the home and family that raised them, where Brother Alan greeted his great-grandchildren, and Sister Carolyn spent her lifetime in patient service. The Lower Salford farm of Abram and Helena Alderfer lay in the midst of a largely Pennsylvania German and Mennonite community. Coming to America in the early 1700s, the Alderfers and other Mennonite families lived quiet, predominantly rural lives, part of a faith community that valued piety and hard work. Son Ryan, who would eventually take over the family farm, as a young man had not yet adopted the plain dress his church would increasingly emphasize. His wife-to-be, Susan, equally as stylish, was also an Alderfer from neighboring Upper Salford Township. Both families were part of the Salford Mennonite congregation. Ryan and Susan were married in 1902, at which time they joined the church, as was the pattern. By 1915, Ryan and Susan had 4 boys, Jacob, Ralph, Alan, and Abram, and a daughter on the way. In that year, Ryan's name was placed in the lot for minister at Salford. He and the other candidates chose at random from specially prepared Bibles, and the lot fell on him. Historian John Ruth, who was also called to service by this traditional method, knows the spirit in which this news was received.
The interesting thing was that when the lot fell on him, it just took. Unlike the more worldly type who would say, "Oh, how unfortunate," and all that. If that was what God wanted, that's what he would be.
For son Sanford and his brothers and sisters, Ryan's acceptance of the church's call would define their lives.
I am the son of Ryan and Susan Alderfer, and I was born on September the 25th, 1923, on the farm homestead on Upper Mainland Road. And my father was ordained by Lot in May of 1915, and so I knew nothing other than I was the son of a Mennonite preacher and the son of a Mennonite preacher's wife. And when we had services at the Sanford Mennonite Church, there wasn't a question who's going. We only had to know when we were leaving. And of course he made his livelihood farming, but his farming was third place. Church was first, second, family, and then the farm.
Both Ryan and Susan knew their role. They knew the traditional role, and you paid a price.
When Ryan and Susan's last child, Harold, was born in 1926, the Alderfer farm was home to 4 generations, including the families of older brothers Jacob and Abram.
I am the youngest of 8. I had 7 siblings. Our arrangements were like this. Sanford and I shared a bedroom. Our grandmother had her own, and my parents had their own, and so did Neil and Carolyn. But then Abram and Elizabeth had one bedroom with themselves and the 2 little boys. And then Jake's had the other side, but the bedrooms were crowded. But we didn't know they were.
I was embraced with so much happiness and love. We were very poor, but we didn't really realize how poor we were. We just enjoyed what we had.
Widowed grandmother Caroline lived with the family for 16 years, and of course spoke the language used by everyone in the household.
We spoke Pennsylvania Dutch. You can imagine we had a lot of learning to do to this day with speaking English.
I had to admit that I could not speak English when I got there to school.
School was the nearby mainland one-room schoolhouse.
When it was fair weather, we could walk across our neighbor's field to the school there on Store Road. It was a mile walk. But the Metzes joined us, or the Senecos joined us, or the Loberaks, or we called them the Polish people, the Ukrainians.
We were either Pennsylvania Dutch or Polish, and they spoke their language, and we spoke Pennsylvania Dutch, and they were my good friends.
That was really a wonderful experience for us to have already as children going to school, a mixture of that other culture.
The whole school only had 23 pupils, and I was the only one in my class. So I was always at the head of the class because I was the only one there. And then 8th grade, I was then 12, going on 13. Now it was graduation time, and I could not go to high school because we needed a farmer, we needed a hired man, and that is when I concluded my formal education.
Harold, too, finished school with the 8th grade and continued to play his part on the family farm.
When you'd first come home from school, you'd have a certain amount of things to do that you just went and did. First it was the chickens, and then it was the dairy. And Sanford and I don't know that we ever complained about that. It was an understanding that all of you worked.
I was a kind of fellow that would say, I can do it. And my father would let me do it. And at age 9, my father trusted me with a pair of horses and a one-row walking plow. And I worked all day long. A 9-year-old boy, I was tall and skinny.
Everyone's contribution to the farm and family economy was important, especially during the Great Depression.
At that time, I would say probably all of the people around here didn't have many dollars. They knew what it was like to go to school with patched clothes. And that was the way of life. And we were always taught that it wasn't wrong to be poor or a sin to be poor, but it was to be sloppy.
There were lessons to be learned, even in one of Sanford's favorite pastimes,
See, I started hunting at age 12 or 13, seriously. And we went out hunting, and I didn't see a cockbird all afternoon. And of course, the hen birds were not legal then. And I said, the next hen pheasant I see, I'm going to shoot. And sure enough, I was in the field, and there sat a beautiful hen bird. So I just shot, but then I got to her quickly, and I picked her feathers, and then I put everything in a bag and buried it in the manure pile. And we had pheasant for supper. And a neighbor came over, and he said in Dutch, "We schmacht the forbidden fruit." How does the forbidden fruit taste? Then my mother says to me, "Wat is ken honen?" I says, nee, ze wat ken honen, ze woon England. Ja, well, dan as ich kent. And she meant that no, she wasn't going to eat it, and she did not.
Susan's principled response to what might have seemed a harmless transgression was a lesson in the spirit of honesty and integrity that guided the family's life.
As the 20th century came, there were two tracks through Lower Salford, two tracks through the Mennonite church. You could do your business as an American, you could succeed, whereas Ryan's children took that other unspoken track where you had a certain kind of scruple that went all the way to the core.
The track of denying self and serving others, which Ryan and Susan humbly accepted, could seem a burden to a young man left with the farm work.
I, as a youngster, felt many times that they were giving away too much and giving too much of their time. But I remember one day, Harold and I, we were the youngsters on the farm, and we kept working when Father was called out. And we had a lot of hay to bring in that day, and he wasn't there to help us. And I remember when I was getting the hay down as it came off the hay loader, I really jammed a fork in it because I was angry because Father couldn't help us that day. He always answered the call, whatever it was, whenever it was.
The boys will still tell you anecdotes of how they were reined in, and the home project is in abeyance to the spiritual community. And that they griped about that, but still in the long run, you can tell that they had a reverence for it.
Though the spiritual community could feel restrictive, it offered richness as well.
Going to Salford was just always a great pleasure. I could have maybe not had too much problem with missing church, although I would have missed the singing. That was one thing that I just always loved, all four parts. See, it was early in life that I knew that there was more than just the melody. There was harmony. And, reading music is just as easy as reading a book. I do love classical music, and I do love waltzes, and I do love dancing. But I never, out of respect to my parents, I never did that. But I could have really gotten into that. Even to this day, I see it as what dancing is really all about, and that's movement. And that enters in when you sing, when you enjoy music, you have to move.
Harold's grandfather was musical. He led singing, and he would sway, I'm told, just like Harold sways.
Obedience and respect for the scruples of their parents didn't come without testing the limits of what might be tolerated.
Where I got in trouble with some of my Mennonite friends were the three things that I really enjoyed that the Mennonite church did not enjoy: roller skating, bowling, and going to a movie. And that was what had sort of separated me. But the minute I rolled that first game, I knew I liked bowling. And I still like that, even now at age 84.
The sons pressed against the allowances, sure, but there was this buried seed in them that came through the double influence of their parents. all the way to the core of who they were. And you knew what to do on ethical questions. You didn't have to sit there and make up your mind. You were what you were.
The seed of integrity was there, but in what future work would it grow for Sanford and Harold?
I wanted to be an auctioneer as a youngster. I admired the auctioneers because of their chant, their voices, but their command of the audience, you know. And of course my brothers tell me I was always imitating an auctioneer, even while I was minding cows, selling the cow or selling the cat, and I made believe I had an audience. Even that was my play. And then, of course, as a boy on the farm, I worked part-time at the poultry auction in Harleysville. And then the auctioneer there was Carl Hendricks, and I admired his ability to command attention and be able to sell. Then it was at age 17, I secretly made an application to the Repert School of Auctioneering in Decatur, Indiana, without the knowledge of my father and mother. And I still remember where I stood when my mother very firmly rejected my idea, and my father also. And they were so smart, and I was not ready for that, but I thought I was.
Working on the farm and at the poultry auction and going to market seemed natural vocations. Older brother Ralph worked for neighboring butcher Abram Metz, and at age 16, Harold followed after.
My first customer was 5 o'clock in the morning. I had the local, the Harleysville, on a Saturday. And then on a Wednesday, I had West Point. And when you started out in the morning, you had a full chuck, you had a full rib, you had and so on, brisket and everything. I'd cut it as people wanted. I had no refrigeration, I had no ice. You know, you fought the drives, the long lanes in the farms with the snow. Experience, I could never buy it. I could never buy it.
Age 17 marked 2 milestones for Sanford, working for Ryan on the farm.
My father bought me a car, and it was a 1938 Plymouth. That would have been in 1940. And starting to date Evelyn, I, of course, then drove to the Landis home over in Bucks County.
Evelyn Landis was herself a preacher's daughter, raised with many of the same restrictions as Sanford.
Her father was Clinton and Ellen Landis, and he then was ordained as a pastor at Rock Hill. And I think Evelyn, if her father said, "No, that's not an appropriate place for you to be," she did not go.
On September 8, 1945, Sanford and Evelyn were married.
We were married in the living room at Stanley Byler's, and our best man and the bridesmaid was Harold, who was then dating Fern. Then when we got married, I made a promise to Evelyn. She really loved the Rock Hill Mennonite Church. So then we took membership at Rock Hill. We were there for 22 years. And I had been a trustee in different committees, but then they asked me to be on the board at the Rock Hill Mennonite Home, which is now the Rock Hill Mennonite Community. And I was on that board till I was 44 when we came back home to Salford.
The newlyweds lived for a year with Evelyn's parents, as Sanford continued working for his father.
I liked the farm. I did, but I didn't. And I had a chance to buy the Alderfer farm. My father offered it to me at the same price that he offered it to Alan and Eva. But I don't know. I guess the Lord had something other in mind for me. It was decided between Evelyn and I that no, we did not want to do that. Then I served as the hired man for Alan for a little bit. Then Alan built us a new apartment on the farm. The 4-car garage with an apartment up top. But I was not satisfied with that. I was getting itchy and I was tired of it. When I then wanted to do something other than farm, I bought a little business in Sharon Hill, a market stall, and that was hard work. And my wife Evelyn, boy, how she worked too. She would cook mush on our kitchen range, and then I'd sell homemade mush made by Evelyn. And I had that for 1 year, and I made no money. And I think that is where I learned how to survive.
Harold, meanwhile, had taken his meat-cutting skills to Ralph's Market in Lansdale.
I was 19 when I went into Ralph's. And then I then took over the meat department. And then I was there 6 years. At that time, I was earning $75 a week, which was a good pay.
Good enough to think of supporting 19-year-old Fern Hagee from nearby Letterock, who became Harold's wife in 1948.
We say, God must have had his hand in it. I could have never, ever found a person that really matched. When it comes to music, we love it. We were married at Fern's parents' home. We had an outdoor. And then we lived at home for a year, which was a tremendous experience for Fern. And then the second year, we rented a place in Souderton.
After his try at the market business, Sanford was still looking for the right opportunity.
In 1949, L.F. Culp hired me to work for him at Clearview Farms, and I was his driver salesman. Then is when I was picked up by a salesman who was also working as a scout for the company in Philadelphia called the Lewis Burke Meat Company, and they offered me a job, more money than I had, and we had 16 upstate men, and I was number 16. I was at the bottom. At any rate, I had made up my mind when I started there, someday I'd be number one. And I pushed for that, and I was number one in sales in my 6th year. That was where I got my education, by dealing with people.
Harold was also recruited by the Alderfer Bologna Company of Harleysville for a position that was new to him.
What you call a driver salesman. See, I had to go in, take the order, come back and fill it, and then go in and weigh everything out, and I had to do all the multiplication and addition of what they owed me, and I collected the money. Sanford, Harleysville, Quakertown, Spinnerstown, on up, and then I had pay plus commission. And you see, that was a challenge. And we moved to the Bologna Company. We lived there, say 8 years. We lived at the Alderfer Bologna Company.
Living in Harleysville, Harold, Fern, daughters Betsy and Sharon, and soon son Ken, were now neighbors to Sanford and his family on the other side of Main Street. Diane, Linda, and Sanford Jr., or Sandy, sometimes rode with their father during his 9 years with the Lewis Burke Meat Company. By the time his youngest, Dwight, was born, Sanford was listening to the voices of his friends in the community.
We must give also compliment to those people who were encouragers. From the real estate end was Willis Letterock, who I was selling meats to from the Lewis Burke Company. And one day he said, "Sanford, you're wasting your time selling meats. You ought to sell real estate, and I'll sponsor you. You have gifts that if you can sell a bologna, you can sell a house." And that was early '59, and then I applied for my license, and he was my sponsor.
The first phone call to Sam, as he was known, was from mainland neighbor Merrill Moyer, who wanted to sell a building lot in order to buy a house in Harleysville. It all fell quickly into place.
We called Sanford and told him that we had a lot to sell. Would he be interested in listing it and trying to sell it? He said, "I think I can help you." And it wasn't very long. A few days, he was back and said he had a buyer for the lot. Then he took us to see the house in Harleysville. And it wasn't long for us to decide that we would like to buy the house. And we closed the deal.
And then I used to do fun auctions for the NYF for Rock Hill and Salford. And the real straw that pushed me was in the barn at Jacob Alderfer. We were doing the NYF auction in there, and Mary Letterock came to me and said, "Sanford, now you just ought to get into the auction business because the community needs you." So finally, at age 36, I did what I wanted to do all my adult life.
Taking 2 weeks vacation from the Burke Company, Sanford was ready to do what he had first considered 20 years earlier.
The training I had came from the Rice American School of Auctioneers in Mason City, Iowa. We had mock auctions out there, and the different auctioneers had specialties. And one was pronunciation and articulation. I have a $5 bid that I heard 10. Actually, an auctioneer is making a statement and asking a question. You know, you tell somebody you have, but you want more. Would they be willing to pay it? Is really what it is.
Schooled in bid calling, display, and promotion, Sanford needed only his first opportunity.
When I came back, I was so charged up. I knew this was a thing I had to do. And then Bob Clements was selling his place, and I said, Bob, I'd like to be your auctioneer. I just went to auction school. Huh? Oh, I'll hire you. And that was my first auction, which was February the 6th, 1960. And then after that, my second auction was for Harold Bauman. He had a place for sale up in Bally. And he said, I have a piece of real estate up there I just can't sell. Would you take it to sell it at auction? I said, sure. And but I said, I don't want to go up there and waste my time. I want to be sure that you want to sell it, because I want to sell it at absolute auction, which I was told in school what to do. And you know what? I sold that real estate for more than he was asking for a year, and I sold that at auction. Now I knew that I was in the right business.
At age 36, Sanford was giving up the security of a good job, not knowing what to expect of his new vocation.
If I can make a couple $100 a week and support my family, I'll be happy. And of course, there were weeks maybe I didn't make even a couple $100. But then the community just stepped up and put me in business and kept me in business. And I didn't do everything right. I couldn't have. But we made some mistakes and then corrected them and went on from there. It was so exciting. It was so exciting.
Sanford's approach to the auction business built on some of his natural strengths.
The art of selling is making people willing to buy. And it takes a showman. You know, I like to have a suit of clothes on that's well tailored and well cared for. And that was my signature. And that was what made me different, I guess. And it worked. It worked. Displaying things. That is where I excelled and I felt with my competition. In business knowledge. No, I never had a degree in business. I never went to a business school. But I learned by making mistakes, and I learned by just simply telling you, you know, I just don't know. Can you help me? And there was people out there willing to help me.
The greatest and most enduring help came from someone who shared a brother's bond.
In '60, Sanford asked me if I would be recording clerk for him. That was really my original role. In '61, I went to auction school. Sanford encouraged me to do that. Then I also got my real estate sales license through Willis. But the big one came when he asked me to be with him full time. But you see, already a year and a half into it, there was a tremendous amount of work. And one day Sanford said, I am so tired. Just come up and sell an item or two. And I had never done that before. So you see, we were on our way. But there was no doubt in my mind, and I wonder, even for Fern, to make that swing was risky. We were building the house, and we had the 3 children, and Sanford had 4 children.
27 auctions the first year was doubled to 54 the next. The family's home at 388 Main Street became the office of Sanford Alderfer Incorporated, and the back porch was enclosed to hold a desk, phone, and filing cabinet.
This is where I started the office back in really December '59, or even a few months before that, when I got my real estate license. And the smallest office in the North Penn area, but I did have a window air conditioner in there to keep it cool. And then this had been our dining room, and when Harold first came, he and I shared a dining room table sometime.
This meant some disruptions in the family's life, as Sandy remembers.
The biggest difference was our family time was interrupted with a lot of phone calls. He constantly left us know that he needed to answer the phone. And that became very early that this is a service, that we're serving the community.
And would you believe it? My wife had to take care of us two guys. We only had a small office, and so we had things on the dining room table. And here was two brothers scratching their heads and trying to get things together on the dining room table and the kitchen table and the back porch.
Where had these brothers learned the patience it took to make their roles work?
He had his gifts, and I had mine, and it was his business, and I tried to fit into wherever we could work together. And I wonder how much thought that maybe both he and I had really put into it, because we had no idea of our income. We had no idea. See, no work, no pay.
It was a big, big move. And I think back now of almost 46 years, that was quite an undertaking for a couple brothers to do.
We were as green as they would come. But I think both Sanford and I knew that we were really working at something that was working out. Yeah, between the two of us having each our responsibilities. But you often wonder how that all of that worked.
Their two value systems from Grammy and Grandpa and the community was similar. That's why those two stories go hand in hand, because their values were really identical. What Dad said we're going to do is exactly what Harold would have thought we were going to do. He just wouldn't have articulated it, and it just worked.
I was so fortunate to have good roots in the community, and I was Ryan Alderfer's son. And I tell you, it was great. But people believed in me, and I couldn't believe how they did.
We both knew what we wanted, and we were able always to talk that out. We never ever had anything major that really would have any reason to separate us.
Well, like somebody said, you couldn't hitch them wrong. They were hitched together, and they knew how to do it together.
Right now, I'm as excited about the Alderfer Auction Company that I was when I was putting together in my mind that I didn't know what I was putting together. But it's been a community service, a neighborhood service, a church service that turned into a national and even now an international.
Dad plowed the new field. We've just been disking it and replanting it.
Without the vision and the dream of Sanford, the company would not exist today. And without the hard work and the dedication of Harold, it wouldn't look like it does today either.
I was very blessed. Just the fact that Sanford and I are still able to be together. You think back of the opportunities that one made possible for the other.
He and I played together, worked together, hunted together, fought together, and he has been my good brother.
After the auction, there were many, many good feelings between all of us that worked it, Sanford and I, to come home and tell your family it was another honey of a day.
It was beyond a day going to work. It was a mission. It was a mission, and every day was that.
Dad believes God's calling for him was to be in this business. And I believe Harold looked at every day as God's calling.
And the whole thing was, I trusted the Lord. And it said, all thy ways acknowledge him, and he shall direct your path.